Hey guys, Sam here. I'm here to talk about the 2021 running back Dynasty class. You know, the guys coming out of college that are going to be going into the NFL pretty soon. We've heard a lot of talk recently about this insane upcoming wide receiver class, which followed in the footsteps of the likes of CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, So we're expecting this wide receiver class with Jamar Chase and Devonta Smith and those other guys to be absolute bonkers. One thing I haven't heard much talk about recently, outside of Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, is the running back class. And there are certainly some guys that can help you out your dynasty team, and depending on landing spot, could really be some late round steals. So I wanted to do a deep dive into the second and third and also fourth tier of the 2021 Dynasty running back class and see what you guys think of each one. Now, before we really get into it, I want to mention that I've separated these classes essentially into tiers. Obviously, Etienne and Harris, they're interchangeable 1-2. You guys probably have your preference. But outside of that, there's some clear front runners for the third spot. There's some really nice, probably round 2, round 3 of Dynasty draft guys. And then there's some guys that have been overlooked and could potentially be late round value if they go to the right situation. So the way I'm doing this is I'm going to show you my personal front runners for the third spot. I'm going to show you the third tier generally of running backs, which is surprisingly big this year, especially considering the drop off after Etienne and Harris. And then I'm going to show you some of my personal sleepers and why I think that they could be successful in the NFL. So let's start with my personal front runners for the third spot. And there's actually 3 of them that I decided on. I'm going to go with Kenneth Gainwell from University of Memphis, the likes of Tony Pollard and Darrell Henderson Jr. And I also believe Antonio Gibson. I'm also going to go with Javonte Williams out of University of North Carolina and Chuba Hubbard out of Oklahoma State. Now these guys are all great prospects. Some could argue that they're up there with Etienne and Harris, but for the most part they have been ranked generally in tier 2 altogether. These guys will be really solid in the NFL, but the others are more surefire stars. Now I want to start by discussing Kenneth Gainwell. I think that Memphis running backs have been rather surprising in recent years, and I think he is a pretty surefire, solid, at least RB2 in Dynasty. Obviously depends on the situation he lands in, but Gainwell can operate well pretty much both as a runner and a pass catcher. His pass protection, his ball security, and his general body mass is less than you'd like compared to most big backs in the NFL. But on the flip side, he's rather explosive and he can change directions quite quickly. And some eye-popping statistics prior to his opting out last season was that he had over 600 reception yards for an average of 12 yards per reception, and he actually averaged over 6 yards a carry while scoring 13 touchdowns last year. So a pretty well-rounded back. And additionally, if you're in a PPR league or even half PPR, you want to keep an eye out for running backs that can serve that pass-catching role for a team, especially if they don't have a bell cow back like McCaffrey or Cook or Kamara, because those can be some new and upcoming James White or McKissick types that will get you solid flex value week to week. Next, I want to talk about Javonte Williams out of UNC. Now, this guy could honestly, in my opinion, end up being the best running back in the class. I'm not saying he will be, but he does have that potential. When you watch Javonte Williams, he mowed over the University of Miami, and it just gave off Derrick Henry vibes. Obviously, Najee Harris also echoes those, but he's a really explosive back. So Williams at UNC has had back-to-back 1,000 all-purpose yard seasons, and he is a 3-down back. He can be a bell cow, and he's got solid blocking. And he also doesn't shy away from contact. He runs through it. And although he doesn't have absurdly elite speed, he's pretty much as well-rounded as a running back could be. He has 19 rushing touchdowns and averages 7.3 yards per carry, along with 25 receptions for about 12 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. And then, as I mentioned, against Miami, he embarrassed them, the number 10 team in the country at the time. He had 236 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 10.3 yards per carry. He averaged a first down per carry against a rather solid Miami team. So the numbers speak for itself. And finally, to round out my front runners, I want to mention Chuba Hubbard. I think last year he was actually probably ranked higher than he is now, but he is still a very good running back, and he is quick. He is really fast. So Chuba is incredibly explosive and can easily accelerate through an opening in order to get to like the second level of defense towards the safety. He used to run track in high school, so that's not really that surprising. But despite the speed, he actually is fairly patient. He's got like the Le'Veon Bell early Steelers instincts. And he doesn't really have many ball security issues that you'd find with most rookie running backs. He does do a good job of carrying the ball and the outside hand on further away from defenders. But on the flip side of all this, he is not very comfortable in a pass catching role. He's just a very fast runner. And we haven't seen much good blocking out of him. Now, obviously, when I'm referencing blocking, that's more about playing time. If we're discussing fantasy, blocking is not a huge deal. So he is just a big play waiting to happen. He's going to be like, as Henry Ruggs is to wide receivers, he is the running back that is just going to explode for an 80-yard touchdown. But he won't be as effective in PPR leagues. So now we're going to get into the third tier of what I qualify as the third tier of the 2021 running back class. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to disagree that some of these guys are ranked too low or something. And I'm just going to go ahead and say, outside of the tiers themselves, the order in which I say these guys is not indicative of where I think they are in terms of talent. So this is a pretty hefty list, as I mentioned. So we've got Zamir White out of Georgia, Trey Sermon out of Ohio State, Max Borghi, I might be mispronouncing that, out of Washington State, CJ Verdell out of Oregon. We got Kylan Hill out of Mississippi State, Master Teague also out of Ohio State, Javion Hawkins out of Louisville, and then rounding out the group we have Jamar Jefferson out of Oregon State and Michael Carter out of University of North Carolina. So obviously, some of the running backs I just mentioned, those are some loaded running back rooms across the country. Ohio State has an incredible running back room with Master Teague and Trey Sermon. Michael Carter is following up Javonte Williams, and both of them are on NFL scouting boards. And this is a really exciting group of running backs that, if given the opportunity, will really explode. So I'm going to dissect each of them one by one. So I want to start with Zamir White, who might have fallen a bit in the past few years. He's a really powerful, strong back. He runs north to south and likes to stay between the tackles. He also has a really good habit of falling forward for additional yardage. He's not particularly quick or agile, but he's 6 foot, 215 pounds, and is just a solid size running back. And this year he's actually averaged 5.6 yards per carry on about 133 attempts. Another issue, though, is he's basically a non-factor in the passing game. And then, big red alert, he's coming off of back-to-back ACL tears, 2 ACL tears. He is a really gritty, tough player who will be good in the NFL if he can stay healthy, but it's up to you if you want to I don't want to say waste, but use a higher pick on a guy who's got such an injury history, but he is a very strong back. The next one I want to jump into is Kylan Hill out of Mississippi State. Kylan Hill is another really physical, strong running back. Strength is the name of his game. You can't half-hearted tackle him. Like, he's got kind of a Derrick Henry, you can't bring me down sort of thing. He's not super agile, but he's very decisive in decision-making when he's running. He also doesn't have top-end speed, so he's not going to necessarily break away from the secondary, but he will get you that first down yardage. He also doesn't shy away from contact. And in 2019, he put up 1,350 yards on about 240 carries, which is about 5+ yards per carry. And he also got 18 catches for 180 yards. So he's not super involved in the passing game, but he can pass catch. Next one I want to talk about is Trey Sermon out of Ohio State. He transferred from Oklahoma. We're going through a lot of these strength guys one after the other, so I'm going to keep it up right here. He is 6 foot, 216 pounds. He's a very strong downhill runner who will get extra yards, but also won't be breaking away. He isn't super patient, but he's really, really strong. He's not necessarily as big of a back as the other ones I mentioned, but he runs with purpose. You know, he's smarter than the average running back coming out of college. He's a straightforward running back. He'll get you yardage. He's disciplined. He's not incredibly fast. And most recently, he gashed Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game for 331 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 11.4 yards per carry. It is a bit of an outlier, but you know, if you're going to be investing in him, it's really nice to see that sort of production. Now, this next one is for you guys in PPR leagues. Max Borghi, I'm just assuming I'm saying that wrong. He is the pass catching back of this class. Everyone always says, oh, he's the next Christian McCaffrey, but he's not as skilled. But if you're getting compared to Christian McCaffrey, you're definitely worth a look in Dynasty leagues. Borghi is like essentially a wide receiver coming out of the backfield. He's really agile. He has quick feet. In 2018, he had 53 receptions for almost 400 yards. And last year, he had 86 receptions for 600 yards. As I said, he's drawn comparisons to Christian McCaffrey. To temper expectations a little bit, I think his pass catching skill has drawn comparisons to Christian McCaffrey's. He's going to be a really good PPR back, but he will not be a bell cow by any means. But if he ends up as a good third down back in a certain team's role, that would be a fantastic pickup. Next, we're going to actually go to another change of pace back, third down back, in CJ Verdell out of Oregon. He's not as big as some of the other ones we mentioned before, but he's very shifty and quick. He's a small runner, but he runs behind his blockers rather intelligently and has a pretty good job running north-south. He could also be used as a special teams kick returner in the NFL because of his speed. He's not as elusive to tackle as you'd hope for a back that is his size, but on the flip side, he is very willing to put his body on the line and block for his quarterback, and he's pretty good at it. His vision is really good, and because of his patience and speed, he can break off for chunk plays that also he can beat out the secondary of certain defenses. So that is a potential chunk play waiting to happen. The last 2 years, he's produced over 1,000 yards and is averaging 5 yards per carry and 6 yards per catch. Based off of what I've researched, I would say that his immediate value is really dependent on the quality of the offensive line he gets drafted to. Because if there's a solid offensive line, he could be a really good PPR back, but outside of that, he might need a few years before he's worthwhile. Next, I want to go back to the Ohio State locker room with one of my favorite names in this draft class, Master Teague. He's been blessed, unfortunate, I don't know, to have to share the running back room for many years. Last year he had to share it with J.K. Dobbins. He also has an injury history. I think he tore his Achilles. Although he's a very explosive back, he actually has a very extensive injury history. An Achilles tear in college. And then going way back, he had a peroneal tendon subluxation that required surgery in his senior year of high school. Because he's been sharing the Ohio State running back room for a while, he hasn't had as much opportunity as you'd like to expect, so he's a bit of a question mark. So I wouldn't give a second rounder for him. Maybe start looking at him towards the third round. Next, we're going to go to Louisville with Javion Hawkins, and I'm going to come right out of the gates and say he's very similar to CJ Verdell out of Oregon. These are quick, shifty backs that can break off for chunk plays if they can just get in the open field. And at the same time, even though they're small backs, they will be blockers. So Hawkins is actually only 5'9", 196 pounds, but he's super quick. He's not going to overpower any defenders, but he's going to beat them with finesse. As I mentioned, he's a willing blocker, but he is going to get overpowered a lot. So his best block chance is a cut block. His vision isn't necessarily the best. He runs into his blockers a lot, but if he can get in the open field, he's lethal. He's had 100-yard rushing games against Notre Dame and Clemson, so he's done it against good teams. He will also probably need a good offensive line to maximize his potential. On the flip side, he can outrun linebackers quite easily. And though he doesn't have that many pass catching stats, he should probably find a way to be able to transition his size and catching ability to the NFL. Next, we're going to go back to Oregon, but actually hit Oregon State with Jermar Jefferson, who is actually one of them who could end up declaring for the NFL draft or could actually return to school if he thinks the draft class is a little bit too loaded for his liking. He is a rather intelligent running back. He's 5'10", 215 pounds. Jefferson has really great vision, good patience, and often runs through tackles. We haven't seen much of him in the passing game, but he is sharp and quick with his cutting. He's a north-south runner who will benefit from solid offensive line blocking because he usually waits for holes to open up. He's been averaging just under 6 yards per carry over 3 years at Oregon State and potentially could go back for another. And rounding out the end of this group, I want to go back to the University of North Carolina and discuss Michael Carter. Now, before I get into this, the UNC running back room has the eye of NFL scouts, and because of this, Michael Carter could end up being drafted higher than some of the guys I've mentioned here. So obviously, Javonte Williams is the better running back at UNC. I don't think anyone's going to be debating that. But Carter has incredible lateral movement ability. He has amazing agility. He's a good all-around athlete who can return kicks. He has good hands. He's difficult to bring down. One issue is there's no thing that particularly pops for Carter. You know, he's good at football. He's a good running back, but there's no particular thing that pops. So because of that, he is not necessarily considered a top-tier prospect, but he is well-rounded, and I would not be surprised if an NFL team just grabs him for running back room security. And it's also worth noting that Michael Carter, like Williams, also embarrassed Miami. So that's important to note. They both embarrassed Miami in the same game. Carter had 24 rushes for 308 yards. I would not always expect that outburst, but again, it is nice to see that he's capable of it. So that's going to round out my third tier of the 2021 running back class. I'm going to try and give you some late round stabs, some fourth rounders that I personally have been interested in. You know, if you can get them at that value, it would be fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and list them right now. We've got Kennedy Brooks out of OU. We've got Larry Roundtree, not Roundtree, Roundtree out of Mizzou. Some of you might know this guy. We got Rakeem Boyd out of Arkansas. And, of course, the famed 8-touchdown guy, Jarrett Patterson out of Buffalo. And I will mention at the end some names I might be leaving off this list. I can't cover everyone, obviously, but these are some late round stabs that I would personally be looking at, and I'll explain why right now. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Kennedy Brooks out of OU. He's 5'11", 216 pounds, and he opted out of the 2020 season. But in his freshman and sophomore years, he was actually able to break 1,000 yards rushing, which was more impressive his freshman year because he averaged 8.9 yards per carry with 12 touchdowns. That decreased in the sophomore year to 6.5 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. And obviously, there wasn't much on him outside of those 2 years. Historically, he's been more of a grinder rather than like a breakaway splash play guy. He's a big question mark. We don't know a lot about his receiving ability. But for a fourth round grab, someone who's had 2,000 yard seasons, that's really solid. So Larry Roundtree is the next one I'm going to discuss. He's from Mizzou. He is a big play waiting to happen. He has a lot of other concerns, but he can break away. And for a fourth round pick in Dynasty, there's not much more you could ask for. He's known for his vision, and he's always one cut away from a big play. And this is also really important because the type of vision he has isn't teachable. He does have some ball control concerns, and we don't know a lot about his receiving ability, but he averages 5 yards per rush, and he has a lot of upside and big play potential, so that gives him upside late in a dynasty draft. Next, I'm going to discuss Rakeem Boyd, and I mentioned that some of you might know this guy. The reason is that he was on Netflix's Last Chance U, so he made an appearance on season 3 after he struggled academically at Texas A&M. He made his way all the way back to D1 at Arkansas, so he is a good comeback story. His receiving ability is underused, but he certainly has the hands and speed to do well in the NFL. He's incredibly dangerous after the catch. His long-term speed is good, but not incredible, but his short-term burst speed is incredible. He shrugs off half-hearted tackles and is rather patient. His leg drive and footwork are wonderful, but he likely will not be a three-down back in the NFL. He's not a great pass protector either. His athleticism gives him solid upside this late, however. Another one you guys might know is Jarrett Patterson, him of the famed 8-touchdown game that had us all in awe. He had 8 touchdowns with 409 yards. And even though he plays in the MAC, he's still talented. Also, Khalil Mack came out of the MAC. And also, Patterson is a rather low center of gravity runner. He's 5'9", 195 pounds, but he has good running ability on the inside. He's elusive in space, and he even finds a way to hit small holes. He's also quite good at creating yards after contact, and on the flip side, we don't really have much of an idea about his pass catching ability, but if an NFL team feels comfortable taking him in the draft, you should feel comfortable taking him potentially as a fourth round late prospect because he has high upside, as you've seen. So that's going to round out my 4 tiers, essentially, of the 2021 running back class. I did miss a few guys. I couldn't talk about every single one. I wanted to leave some out for you guys to discuss. Notable names that I might have left out are Puka Williams from Kansas, Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech, Muhammad Ibrahim from Minnesota, and Elijah Mitchell from Louisiana. Obviously, these rankings are pretty fluid as things have gone along. But one thing that is clear is that this running back class is going to have some gems in it, but you're going to have to do the research to find the right one. Etienne and Harris are going to be studs, more than likely, but I guarantee you there are some running backs that you can grab probably in the 2nd or 3rd round, maybe even 4th round, that will do good for your Dynasty League for years to come. Anyway, Sam Eichenwald here, and this has been your 2021 Dynasty Running Back Rankings Report. I hope you guys enjoyed.